the first thing to talk about is just to recognize some terminology. If you see a power function, you see something that's written or that states power function, it's speaking of the following form. Okay. And in this, A is a real number, okay, and B is a, does anybody remember what that symbol is, the Q? Quotient represents what type or subcategory of real number? Quotient is a fraction. What's it called when we close? You're rational. There you go. Perfect. Okay, so B is a rational number, so it can be an integer, but it can also be a fraction. Okay, this is called a power function. Okay, as far as the types of operations that you can perform on these functions, we're going to look at combinations and compositions. Right? All right, so combinations involve just regular mathematical operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Okay. And the way that a combination of functions will look is it's going to have kind of the following form. It'll say something like this. F of x is equal to negative 2x. G of x is equal to x plus 3. Okay, and then it'll ask you to find these different combinations. So what that means is it'll say, it'll ask you to find f of x plus g of x, f of x minus g of x, f of x times g of x, and f of x divided by g of x. Right, so you can solve these by hand, right? This is a pretty easy thing to do. If you were to take negative 2x plus the quantity x plus 3, can you guys do that mentally? What would that be? Negative x plus 3, right? Okay, so you can evaluate these mentally. Now, if you're asked to perform multiple combinations on the same set of functions, it might be easier to enter this in your calculators because we can do the following. Again, there's a number of different ways to approach this, but probably the easiest thing to do is, or I'm going to show you some other things that you can do. One, you could plug these in at, bless you, y1 and y2. And so one possibility is if you let your y1 and y2 of x be these f and g functions, we can go to our y editor. We can enter the entire equations in, again, just the expression part of it, so negative 2x, and then x plus 3. If we do that, remember, anytime that we bring up y1 of x and y2 of x, we're really drawing on those expressions. So we can add them, subtract them, multiply them, and divide them. So what we can do here is we can go to our home screen, type in y1 of x. Remember, this is pulling up the expression negative 2x. And we can add that to y2 of x. We hit enter and it confirms. Here it reordered the terms, but 3 minus x. Remember, when you write your answers, you always write your answers in standard form, which means variables come before the constants. So even if your calculator doesn't show it in that form, please enter it that way. Okay, now if we wanted to find what f of x minus g of x is, rather than retyping everything new, we can just go down, change that plus to a minus, hit enter, and we would get our next answer, negative 3x minus 3. If we wanted to find what the product of those is, we could just go in, change that subtraction to a multiplication. And now, here we don't want to write it as factors, so what do we need to do in this particular case? what's the word? Expand. Okay, so we want to expand it. So we get our polynomial form, negative 2x squared minus 6x. And then finally, if we want to see the quotient of these two, again, we can come in here and divide. Right. Now, depending on what form I ask you to put this in, the quotient may simply be easier to do by hand, because if we took f of x, which is negative 2x, and we divided that by x plus 3, that winds up being a pretty simple expression, right? That's the fraction. There's your answer right there. You don't have to simplify it out or rewrite it in any other form. All right, I want you to try a couple here, examples of this on your own, and then when I go through this one, I'm going to show you an alternate method for setting these up. Okay, so let's say your f of x function is 2 minus x, and your g of x function is just 3x. Okay, I want you to find all the different operations. So I want you to find the sum of them. All right, what did you guys get for the combination f of x plus g of x? 2x plus 2. Okay, what about their difference? What'd you get? 2 minus 4. So minus, like I'll write it in order. So negative 4x plus 2. Okay, what about their product? So in if we expanded it out, okay, so again in standard form, so negative 3x squared plus 6x. And then finally, their quotient is simply going to be, again, I'll write it in the order negative x plus 2 over 3x, and we can leave it in that form. And let me show you an alternate method for solving this, and that you can choose to use as well. Okay. See this little button above the on key that says STO with a little sideways triangle on it? Store. So you can take a function and you can store it as a single variable if that's easier for you to manipulate or write. And so if I looked at this, another way that I could take this expression is I could just write out 2 minus x, hit this store button, and I can choose any variable to assign this to. Now, for the ease of following the directions on the problem, I'm going to choose f for this, but I could pick anything I want. But I want this to be my f function. And then I'm going to take the second one, 3x, and I'm going to store that as g. So alpha, I'm going to choose the g key. So now anytime I write f or g, it actually refers to those entire expressions. So you might simplify this by writing f plus g. Oops. I don't know how the fog got there. All right, let me reset this. All right, so you can take your first expression, store it as one variable, take your second function, store that as your second variable, in this case g. And so again now, if I'm taking and combining these, I can type in f plus g. And when I do, what you see is it confirms what I have here. So I can then subtract those, f minus g. I get, again, 2 minus 4x. You have to reorder it on your own. I could take f times g. Okay, and again, if you needed to expand it, you would do that, perform those steps. Okay, so I don't care what you choose. Okay, the advantage to using the Y editor would be what? There you go, perfect. Okay. The Y editor does allow you to graph if you had to look at the relationships of graphs. Okay, whereas the storing as a variable or single variable does not necessarily allow you to graph. Now, if you guys are using the calculators on your computers, and storing it as a variable might be pretty easy because you guys do know you can use your keyboard, right? So if you could just type F, then plus G, it might be easier to do it that way than to type in the y1 of x, y2 of x each time.